Hello, people. Andrew here, and talking about comics from a reader, collector, speculator, investor point of view, in that order of importance to myself. Today it's Fantastic Four, Volume 7, written by Ryan North and ran from 2023 to 2025 for 33 issues. The interior art was done by half a dozen different artists. So right off the bat, I'll talk about the artists and just say that they were good. Nothing that really stood out for me, but they were capable of telling a story. So I enjoyed the artwork. Just didn't strike anything big with me. Like I didn't remember too much about it. I remember some of the illustrations of the Thing were a little bit strange. There's one artist that drew it without a neck, and it looked like his head was just like this big ball that rolled around over the top of his body, and another one that drew the head sort of like a stump coming out of his chest. But other than these strange artistic choices, it was pretty good interior artwork. I will say this about the covers, though. The first 24 issues were illustrated by Alex Ross, painted by Alex Ross. So, right away, if you're a collector of Alex Ross material, you want the first 24 issues. And these aren't the variant issues; these are the standard issues. There's variants, of course, for every one of these issues, and even though there's 24 Alex Ross, there's probably another 75 variants for all of the various covers. But Alex Ross from 1 to 24. Okay, so what is the Fantastic Four about? Well, we know what the Fantastic Four is about, but what's Ryan North's take on it? Well, I watched a couple of interviews with Ryan North, and he had this to say about his proposal, because he was given the option to, the opportunity to pitch a Fantastic Four story, and what would you do? How would you approach it? And he looked at it and said, well, Dan Slott just came off doing something very big. I want to do something smaller. I want to do something that's episodic. I want, a single issue here, two issues here, followed by another single issue, followed by another two issues, another two issues, another single issue. Episodic because, sometimes when you have a long storyline that's 12, 15, 18 chapters long, if you come into it, say, on chapter 4 or whatever, even with the introduction on the first page, it's very easy to get lost and unsure of what's going on, and you don't really get a complete story. It goes back to the old philosophy of Stan Lee that says every comic book is potentially somebody's first comic book. And by making it episodic, it does become more accessible. And I did appreciate that. I enjoyed that approach to the Fantastic Four. He was also looking at it and says there was a show that inspired him called, I just want to make sure I got it right, is it Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives, where these guys would come into a town, they'd see a problem, they'd fix the problem, and they'd leave the diner or whatever in better shape than when they first arrived. So he took the look at that concept and said, yeah, that's what I can see with the Fantastic Four. They see a problem, they fix a problem, they leave the area better than when they had first found it. So it's on that sort of concept of how they approach things. Also talked about the fact that the Fantastic Four can do anything. Um, any kind of story. You got an adventure story, a science fiction story, even a horror story, something that's quiet and family based and important in that respect. Something grand. They have villains. They have a mystery. So they could do anything. There was no problem that they wouldn't be willing to tackle and to try and find a solution for that problem. Also like the idea that there was multiple characters. It's not a single character book, it's a multiple character book. You have your Fantastic Four plus one, which would be Alicia Masters Grimm, and you have the four kids. So there's 9 personalities that take place in this book on a regular basis. And Ryan North did a good job of mixing them up. Like, sometimes there would be just 2 of the characters are spotlighted, and there's not necessarily 2 that you would expect. Obviously, you would expect a Reed and Sue type of story, but there's a Reed and Johnny story. There's a Sue Storm and Alicia Masters story. There's a Reed Richards and Alicia Masters story. There's a solo Ben Grimm. There's the kids on their own. There's a kid solo story. So a lot of personalities and a lot of characters and a lot of different ways of mixing these characters up, and it all works really well. I enjoyed the series a great deal. So right off the bat, I'm going to say that I'm going to recommend it, but not without reservations. I'm going to go through some of these books because, as I say, you get to see all of these great Alex Ross covers, and then I can talk a little bit more about some of the individuals, some of the likes and some of the dislikes. Um, This is the first issue. Interesting that within the issue itself, it only focuses on uh, Ben and Alicia. Uh, and one of the things I like about his stories, at least the beginnings of much of his stories, is the pacing. In this one, the first 3 pages are identical except for the final panel on the third page. And this is to illustrate the fact that this particular town is in a time loop. And Ben and Alicia somehow, even though this is a Groundhog Day town, they managed to get into this town. There's some blibbity blab science about cosmic rays having that effect. It doesn't explain why Alicia Masters would have cell phone service, especially since this town has been in this time loop since either, well, I can't remember if it's 1947 or 1957. I think it's 47, but I could be wrong. Anyways, this town is in a time loop where before there was any cell phones anyways, so the fact that she's getting reception of some kind doesn't make a lot of sense. But I didn't let that slow me down from enjoying the story. It was an interesting little time loop story. They found a problem, they fix the problem, and then they move on to the next town. Interesting that it doesn't have all of the characters. It's just Ben and Alicia. Apparently something happened in New York, a bad thing happened in New York, and Fantastic Four are personas non grata, and Ben is on the outs with Reed about something. But that's a future storyline, and there's bits and pieces of that throughout this run that even though it is episodic, there are little callbacks to something that happened in the past, and there are also some trails, breadcrumbs to future stories. But for the most part, it really is episodic in tone. You can pick up pretty much any one of these issues and not be lost. And I did like that. And I like the first issue, and I like this slow introduction to the Fantastic Four. The second issue, that's not my favorite Alex Ross. The second issue features Reed and Sue and Doombots in a town, and it's a good story as well. I really liked Ryan North's approach to writing, and this story, as I say, involving Doombos in a way that I hadn't seen before. I liked it. One of the things that Ryan North, I don't know if he's into science himself, or if he picked up some science periodicals or listened to some podcasts because he was writing the Fantastic Four, and Reed Richards is such a scientist that he would know these new theories and concepts. But the science that is brought to bear within this comic book run made me stop and think, okay, is it actual science or is it just fictional blibbly blab? So I looked into some of it, and yeah, it looks like he's using actual science theories and concepts and ideas, and he's translated them into the story. That's his inspiration for some of his stories. The story coming up, for example, there's the idea that DNA is made up of sugars on one side and acids on another. And if you mirror DNA, you get it in a reverse order, and you create a new life form that, if released upon our planet, would threaten to destroy all life on Earth. This is an actual scientific theory and concept discussed, and it's brought to bear within the Fantastic Four. This reverse mirror DNA, I should suppose, is released upon the world, and the Fantastic Four have to solve that problem and then move on to the next town. So the fact that the science is here and has inspired some different stories and different ideas, I really appreciated that, because you do get some different concepts, and here are a bunch of new problems that we haven't seen in a comic book before, and how do we deal with these? So there's some nice Alex Ross covers here. That's issue number 4, 5. Now, one of the things, and I won't go here, I'll go to the next one, that I didn't like so much about the Fantastic Four, Ryan North's run, is Sue's power creep. Reed gets a little bit of a power creep, and so does Johnny Storm, and Ben, unfortunately, is pretty much forgotten for a lot of this run as the Thing. He's remembered as Ben Grimm, but not as the Thing. But in this situation, okay, the DNA I was talking about, this thing has been released upon the world, and the way that they figure out how to solve this problem is to deny it the rays of the sun for 72 hours. And if you do that, you will kill it. and then life can go back to normal. So to do this, they can't. Sue can't make the sun invisible, but she can fly up into orbit with Johnny Storm, and she can block out the rays that are affecting about 3 or 4 states. She has to get into orbit to be able to see the area that she's got to cast, sort of like this invisibility veil. It's not even a veil, over all the light, and cause all the light rays to be invisible. That's just an amazingly huge power bump to what she could do. I enjoy when writers take a look at a character and they can do something different with their existing powers. With the first time that Sue put a closed bubble over the Hulk's head with no air to suffocate him, I thought, whoa, that's amazing. I hadn't seen that before, but it's within the realms of her powers and abilities. When she threatened somebody to put a force bubble within their brain and then expand it and blow out their brain, I thought that's pretty violent and nasty, but it's within the realm of her abilities. When Reed Richards stretched his feet or his legs 60 feet tall and walked across the city to get to his destination quicker, I thought, well, there's a smart use of his powers that I hadn't thought of before, but within the realms of what he can do. This one I find is just a little bit too strong. You are blocking out all the rays that cover, 4 states. And you have to be in orbit to do that. And you have to concentrate on it 16 hours a day. That's the other factor, is that you've got to concentrate, because 8 hours is going to be night anyways. But so for 16 hours, she's got to maintain concentration on keeping all of these rays of light invisible. I've seen her in some of the issues where she's concentrating on things, and she can sweat sometimes, drop to a knee, and she struggles with it sometimes. She's very vulnerable in those times, because if you jar her or knock her concentration, all of the invisibility things that she's doing, they all stop happening. But here she is, up in this fantastic car, flying around in orbit, concentrating for 16 hours a day, and she's so bored that she needs Johnny to read her stories to keep her awake. It just, that's just too much of a power creep, and it gets worse. Doom is the best villain in this run of the Fantastic Four. He's handled really well. And it ends with the One World Under Doom, which I haven't read, but we'll get to that. This, the 700th issue featuring Doom, was a really good issue. I like the fact that Doom tried a number of different things, and through trial and error, he comes to an answer. It's not necessarily the answer that he wants, but it's the one that it happens, because this is the way things work. I really enjoyed this issue. It was a great Doom story. It had, and again, the pacing, it just slowly built into it to reveal Doom and what he's all about. A good 700th issue featuring Fantastic Four and Doom. This is a good one. Pick it up. We had some fun when we threw back to old monster tales from early issues of, say, Strange Tales or Tales to Astonish. So this is a throwback to those monster things. But we get into a power creep again with this one here. And again, I have some issues with the power creep. Is that okay? So Ben and Reed and ultimately Johnny sort of been twisted by this creature, and now they're foes. So to combat them, unfortunately, because they've all worked together as a team, Ben and Reed know Sue's strengths and weaknesses, and she's having a hard time keeping them back and a hard time winning. So the concept is that Alicia comes up with the idea of, come up, create me a force bubble that I can mold like clay. All right, I'm not sure about that, but okay. So she molds the clay into a octopus. And she says, now, I want you to enlarge that octopus so that it's gargantuan, and then it will fight in a way that Reed and Ben are unfamiliar with, and this is how we will achieve victory. Well, number one, the molding clay, okay, but now she's got to transfer this. Sue is thinking this so she can see this invisible molded octopus in her mind, and she enlarges it so that it's gargantuan. But now it's got 8 tentacles that are acting independently to strike out at Reed and Ben and whoever's attacking, so that it becomes an unknown attacking force. How how is that possible? I mean, people have problems patting their head and rubbing their tummy, let alone doing 8 things all at once. And this is on the fly, under pressure, as you're being hammered by the thing with your force bubble, but you're creating this almost living octopus thing that's winning in a combat. It just seemed that's just way too much power for Sue to have. And on a fly, I mean, I might give some consideration if she had practiced with this and practiced the idea of moving 8 limbs independently. But on a fly, under this kind of pressure, it just, I, I found that the power creep here was just too much. And we follow up that. I just want to point this one out as being the best story of the lot. It's a great short science fiction story, regardless if you're a fan of the Fantastic Four or not. I will be buying extra copies of this in the dollar bin when I can find it, just to hand out to my friends that used to read comics and some still read from time to time. I think this is a great story, regardless, and I recommend this story. Period. This one was a lot of fun, and you're getting to see all these Alex Ross covers, and I do like some of the Alex Ross covers. I like the ones that have a little bit less color saturation. So there was a 2-issue arc here, issues 12 and 13, and I just found it silly. The nice thing about the episodic is that you may really like a story. I really like the last one, the house and all that sort of stuff, and then if you don't like this story, there's a new one with a new approach to things the next issue or the next 2 issues. And in this case, they go to another plane of wherever, and all of the characters are dinosaurs. That's how the world has evolved. So there's a dinosaur Thor, a dinosaur Iron Man, a dinosaur Fantastic Four. I have a friend who loves dinosaurs, and he would tell you that these 2 issues are the best 2 issues of this run, if he read them. But for me, I just found it very silly. I found it very silly. At one point, I think Reed Dinosaur is a T-Rex, and he's holding on to this thing with his little wee arms that Reed Richards, a human, created, and he's examining it and looking at it like with scientific curiosity and mouthing off about how the science properties of it. And it just looked, to me, it looked silly. So I found these 2 issues to be extraordinarily silly. But, some people really love dinosaurs, and I'll tell you these are the best. In fact, this issue here, 13, okay, here you've got Doom upon Doom Dinosaur, or Dr. Doom Dinosaur. I can't remember what they call it, but it's the dinosaur version of Dr. Doom being ridden by actual Dr. Doom. There's a store I go to, a comic book store that I go to about 2 or 3 times a year, and he really liked this idea and this concept and bought extra copies of this book and is now currently selling them in his back issue bin at $25 a pop. So he's already speculated that this book is going to mean something and be something, because as I say, he's got them on sale for $25 a pop. That's a second opinion, right? Because if it had been up to me and I was just talking about it, I would not have recommended this as a speculation book. Shows you sometimes, what do I know? Because I'm not always right. Maybe he's not right and people aren't going to pay $25 a copy for this book. But he owns a store. He's seen his customer base, and so he's got this one already, as I say, listed for a $25 price. I found it silly, but, that's just me. Now, you got Reed fighting a whole bunch of little villains here, and one of the things that disappointed me about this run was that other than Doom, who was a good villain, but all the other villains, there was very little villainy as far as some of their catalog of characters, and I missed that. I thought There should have been a couple of story arcs that involved a couple of villains. Red Ghost is a bit of a scientist. How about having Ryan North's take on the Red Ghost and have a combat or a confrontation with that? I think that would have been interesting. I think there's a lot of good characters in the Fantastic Four. I would have liked to have seen them better represented within this run. And in fact, this is what I said about poor Ben Grimm as the Thing. I know in the last one I said I'm looking forward to new stories now that he's putting some of his ghosts behind him. But I didn't realize that we'd get so domesticated that he rarely throws a punch at all in these particular books. Now, I'm not always about the combat. Some people will say that, the combat just detracts from the story because, there's hardly going to be any resolution, not much changes at the end of it. But I like to see the different tactics of one character versus another character. How do they get out of this mess and mix up? Who wins and why do they win? So I missed having some villains within this run. As I say, with this set of villains, they just happened to show up, and I thought that was interesting, as they were out of costume, and they said, "Oh crap, Fantastic Four are here," because Johnny Storm recognizes one of them, and there's this little brief battle, and it's over in a moment. But I miss having some villains. I'm not going to tell you all of the stories. This was a good one, a good cover as well. I enjoyed that. This is the kids on a science adventure for school. It was a good issue, and you're getting all these wonderful Alex Ross covers. I really like this Alex Ross cover as well. It reminds me of the one that he did for Flinch. The story was not that good. I didn't like how the problem was resolved, but I'm not going to like all of them. And here we get into, again, some of the power creep. Now, it's funny because the one thing that really struck me is kind of a throwaway moment in this particular story. Okay, so a crater comes and crashes into, I don't know, somewhere in the desert, and the Fantastic Four ride out to the crater, and they're riding invisible horses. Now, I don't think Sue just decided to, okay, well, let's make all the horses invisible because that would be fun. That wouldn't make a lot of sense because horses would be confused as to, following the lead horse, but you can't see it. That wouldn't make a lot of sense. And they're not trying to hide from anybody because they themselves are visible. They're just riding invisible horses. So I have to believe that Sue created these horses for them to ride out to the crater. Problem is that there's a scene where Reed's got the reins in his hand, which gives you the idea that he can guide the horse this way or that. Pull on the left side and he turns left, pull on the right. If you pull back, is he going to stop? Which would mean that the horse is acting independently with some degree of sentience. It's not how Sue's powers work. She doesn't create things with sentience. She would be in control of all four of those horses at all times. She would be the one to make them move forward, which why would you make them horse? I would think that would be very difficult to concentrate on, to make sure that all the horses are moving in sequence and what have you, and each one is being ridden by an independent rider. I think that's too much power, that she can create things that now behave like their actual physical, real counterparts. It goes on a little bit worse, and that to me I thought was the worst of it. But she creates a laser cannon, a working laser cannon, and provides Ben with a set of goggles or like an aiming device to shoot these asteroids out of the sky like Space Invaders. But she's got a working laser, a working targeting system. Johnny Storm fuels the laser through his fire and stuff. But the fact that she's making a working laser cannon, again, that's not how I see her power working. That's how the Green Lantern's power works. He creates the 100-foot fan and turns the power on and the blades spin around. That's what he does. That's not what Sue Storm's power is all about. She doesn't create things and turn them on. So I just, again, the power creep, it annoys me a bit, because future writers are now going to have to deal with that. Her level has just been increased. She was fine the way she was. I don't mind exploring some new avenues, but I think this is just a little too much. Second best story of the run, for me, anyways. It's like a film noir type of thing with a detective story, but it's got a good, solid Fantastic Four element to it. You may think, oh, this is just like a dream sequence or something. It's not. It's a very good Fantastic Four mystery story, and you get this great Alex Ross cover. You get Alex Ross doing American Gothic. There was a couple of tie-in series that go in with the Fantastic Four run. This was Blood Hunt. I haven't read Blood Hunt, so I don't know what it's about, but that doesn't matter. What we have here is, Blood Hunt involves vampires like taking over the world or trying to take over the world. Okay, so and the Fantastic Four have been divided. We got Reed and Alicia over in New York, and we've got the rest of the team somewhere in Arizona. And we tell two stories about how do they handle these situations. They don't deal with the main thing that the vampires are all global. They deal with the immediate that's happening then and there. So Reed and Alicia have to figure out how to save as many people as they can in New York, and the same thing happens with the rest of the team out in Arizona. So it's a much more contained story, and I really liked the way that they dealt with that they weren't part of the big story because they didn't have a place there, but they were still affected by it, and how did they deal with it. So it was a good tie-in to that book. Now, you wouldn't necessarily have to read these two books to get the full story of the Blood Hunt. In fact, these are the only two I've read of the Blood Hunt, so I liked what I read. And you got issue number 23 of Alex Ross, and finally the last of the Alex Ross covers. They're all very nice covers. If you like Alex Ross, this is good stuff. Apparently, he's done a Fantastic Four book that I haven't read yet, called Full Circle. I think that's what it's called. So I'm going to be on the lookout to pick up that. It's a graphic novel, so I'm looking forward to finding that. Issue number 25. And what I found to be one of the a very good issue as well is issue number 26, and this involves Johnny and Reed, and they go on an adventure together. And again, this is one of the things that I liked about what Ryan North did, was that he took characters that don't normally have an adventure together, and he put them in situations where they would have an adventure together. So you get to see a different combination and different tactics and different way that they work. This was a lot of fun. I'll be buying this one again for fun reasons. This is more a story about Nakala than it is about the Mole Man. I know I talked about villains not showing up, and here's the Mole Man, but he's more of a joke villain, just to showcase Nakala and talk about her. It's a good story about her. The Mole Man is just like the catalyst to make the story happen, but he's not very effective. The last 6 issues fall under the One World Under Doom banner and storyline. I haven't read One World Under Doom, so I don't know what that's all about. I find that these 6 issues, and I know Ryan North wrote One World Under Doom, these 6 issues that are part of that run, I find are the weakest of the run. It didn't inspire me to read One World Under Doom. And if there are, and obviously there will be tie-ins because they're Fantastic Four and Doom's, one of their primary villains. It didn't work that well for me. There was some things in here that I didn't particularly like, and it starts somewhat here. When Doom reverts, gets rid of the thing part of Ben Grimm and reverts him back to human. Something that, Ben Grimm has been before, and something that he's wanted. But here, Ben Grimm gets all maudlin, despondent, and depressed that he's been turned into human, and very sad that he can't protect his family, and he reaches out to the wrong people to try and correct certain things, and it's like, this is not the Ben Grimm that I know, because there was a time. Do you remember Walt Simonson's run when Ben Grimm was in his human form and he went on this amazing space adventure and he was bold as brass because that's just who he is. He says, okay, well, this is the punch. I'm going to roll with it and do the best that I can. That's the Ben Grimm that I know, and that's the Ben Grimm that was somewhat in these stories. But here, when he gets reverted back to human form, he gets all sad and depressed, and it's not the Ben Grimm that I know, and I think it's a poor characterization of him. The only thing that seemed to ring true is when he says, if Doom reverted me back to human, then there's a reason that he did it, and it can't be a good reason. So I need to get back to my thing status to defeat Doom. That's about the only thing that I found rang true from Ben Grimm's point of view. There's a couple of other little strange hiccups in this, in the fact that he had lost his powers. So now, because he had lost his powers, the other three's powers start to diminish as well. Again, that's never been the case in 60-year history of the Fantastic Four. When Ben Grimm, as I said, with Walt Simonson, when he lost his powers, the other ones did not lose theirs. When he had to wear the Thing suit for a while, back in the 70s, the other members of the party, they didn't lose their powers. It's a new idea that has really no merit. So I didn't care for that particular extrapolation of events. Doesn't even make sense when, for 5 years the pair of them were separated, Johnny and Ben over here and Reed and Sue over there, in different planes of existence, and yet their powers didn't fail there. In that 5 years' time, there wasn't even a slip in powers. It doesn't make sense either. So I didn't like that, and it's because of that that they go on this final adventure. So it didn't ring true for me. I know we're talking fiction, but nonetheless, it's I didn't care for that explanation. I didn't care for Ben's attitude, or his demeanor in these things. I think we missed the boat here on this one. This was kind of a fun little. Have you ever seen The Twilight Zone? And everybody refers to, It's a Good Life, where the kid says, "You're a bad man," and sends you out to the cornfield. This is like that. It's not necessary for any part of the story. In fact, it didn't even need to be included. Something could have happened earlier so that this wouldn't have been a story. But here it is a story. And as if I take it just as that, it's a Good Life type of Twilight Zone type of story, it was fun and it was fine. But it has no bearing on anything else. And then we get to the final issue, number 33, where the Fantastic Four have their powers back. They're reunited, and we'll move forward from there. End of the run. I don't know. I think One World Under Doom is still continuing at this point in time, beyond here. It's wrapping up, so I don't know exactly what happens there. But this is the end of the run before Ryan North starts up again with an issue number 1. And that's for a future date. So overall, yeah, I really enjoyed it for the most part. There were some things I didn't care for. I didn't care for, as I say, the power creep, the lack of clobbering, 70% less clobbering time in this book. I could have used a good villain, a throwback to some of the old villains. That would have been nice. I did like his writing, and I did like the Alex Ross covers. I like some of those solo stories. I think are just dynamite. As far as, as collecting, we talked about Alex Ross and spec. I've got a comic book shop owner that's specking on issue number 13 with the Dinosaur Doom. So that's a second opinion. Would I get any of this stuff encased in plastic and graded at a 9.8? There's tons of 9.8s out there, I would imagine, because it's a new book. And when you go into a shop now, a lot of the times when you buy a new comic book, it's already bagged and boarded before you even, pick it off the rack or wherever it is. So there'll be a lot of high quality books out there at 9.8. Would I get any of them graded? I mean, it's going to cost you to get them graded. I don't think I would. But then I don't do that, a lot of that anyways. And I can't talk about the variant covers because I don't know what they are, and I'm just not the variant cover type of person. But overall, yeah, I'm going to recommend the Fantastic Four Volume Number 7. I think it was a lot of fun. Uh, and that'll be it for today. So, thanks for listening. Be good to yourself and be good to others. We'll talk again soon.